Hello and welcome to Hawk Talk Takes, the new name for this channel. Anyway, I have here back again Chairman Rabbit for another debate, this time on economics, capitalism versus communism. And we also have Henry with American Madhouse. And I think this is when we just start into our opening thesis of our argument. So, and since Rabbit's the competitor, he gets to go first.
All right. So I guess my spiel is, I believe in a classless, moneyless, stateless society where the means of production are owned in common by the workers. And some may say that that is a utopian society. And while you are correct, I believe it's highly possible. It's been done, countless times. With democratic confederalism in Rojava. You have Puerto Real and Puerto Rico, the sovereign state in Puerto Rico, I guess. Less of a state, more of a city. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. I subscribe to the splinter of anarcho-communism rather than Marxism-Leninism. So I am anti-statist. I am not a Stalin fan. I'm not a Mao fan. I'm not a Xi fan. I do recognize when countries like that do good things, like improve their literacy rates or improve vaccination rates, make progress in civil rights. But overall, I am willing to criticize people who may align with me ideologically because I am opposed to state power and corporate power equally. So I guess that's my opening statement.
Okay, yeah, you still had another like minute and a half, but if you wanted to go ahead, crazy.
That's it. That's all I got.
All right, so I guess this is where I go. So I'll just start by mentioning that in 1800, the literacy rates of the globe was 10%, and right now it is 90%. We have seen an increased number of free marketeering since then. We have seen the exchange from monarchies owning most of the means of production to private citizens owning the means of production. And this has seen rapid improvements in society. And I believe that to help the global poor, they should also adopt this global system. We can see from the few African countries that have adopted a capitalist liberal society like Botswana and Mauritius. They're the most prosperous nations on earth. Meanwhile, nations that have adopted a more African nationalist model, which has basis in socialism, like Zimbabwe and Ethiopia, those nations have not fared so well. And yes, I get the understanding. Yes, there are different versions of socialism. Some aren't as bad as others. Some do advocate for free markets, but I'm blanketly against most forms of socialism, with few exceptions, simply because when we compare I believe when you look at the two systems, at the end of the day, I would much rather live in a Japan than I would in what would be a good example of a socialist country that I'd rather live in a Japan than, say, an anarchist Ukraine in 1920. I'd rather live in America than I would in somewhere like Bolivia. So with that, I'll yield my time.
Okay, cool. So I guess if you guys just want to jump right into your free exchange, I guess. Or do you have questions for each other? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So since I had my opening statement, I guess you can start off the debate. So.
All right. So I guess I'll question this first question. Most people, even if we don't say the Soviet Union was state capitalist, it wasn't socialist, most people would still say, well, yes, even if it is state capitalist, which is, we can debate about that until the cows come home, but the original goal from Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky was to establish a socialist order. So my question is, what did they do wrong, and what have so many others, like Mao, Chavez, Castro, what have they done wrong? and how do we fix their shortcomings?
Well, I will say that I recognize material conditions. Marx wrote about dialectical materialism and how it drives, change in societies, and that's sort of exactly what happened in the USSR. The material changes in the workers. They ended up following, Lenin in the October Revolution, and when he took power, that is essentially the whole problem. Is that Marxist Leninism is a way to establish socialism through a vanguard party, which I believe is the entire problem. Because when you use the state as a bargaining chip through, the means of, sorry, I'm fumbling over my words, but the state does not know the people. And, of course, in the USSR, within the first, 10, 15 years of its formation, you had, capitalist countries such as the USA, basically spying on it and trying to sabotage it immediately under its inception. So that probably contributed to some of its atrocities, because they're trying to fight off those countries. But, I digress. I believe the best way to establish a socialist economic system is, through workers' unions and, worker co-ops. And I sort of sympathize with market socialism, in where, maybe market economies are effective under socialism. I don't quite, agree saying that market economies are incredibly, incredibly prosperous under capitalism, especially for the workers. But they sure are prosperous for 1% of the CEOs. But the best way to establish a socialist economy is directly through the workers. The workers taking control of their workplaces through workplace democracy and work co-ops, and then just sort of building that out rather than trying to do it top down from the state.
Well, I guess my response to that is that okay, let's just say hypothetically we get rid of the state, which is going to be, I think we can both agree that's a big what if. But what exactly replaces the state? Like, are we talking about direct democracy, communal sites? Like, is that what we would be doing?
Well, a lot of people have different, philosophies on that. Marx never wrote about, exactly how communism would be structured. He sort of left that up to people after him. And, my ideal society would be sort of, like the system of Rojava. They have democratic confederalism, where, people of all these different communities, it's sort of like direct democracy, but, they each form their own confederations, and they all vote in their own communities, and then they send representatives to vote like their communities did nationwide. And it's just a cooperative system rather than, a big centralized federal government making all the decisions for people through representatives. But yes, that's sort of my way to do it. Personally, a lot of people have different ways, but that's just the way I think would be most effective.
Well, I don't have any way to really. I don't think I can really rebuttal that, because most economic crises in Rojava probably come from more Assad gassing them, more or less. So yeah, I can. I'm seeing where you're coming from, and yes, I do support Rojava 100% against Assad. So so I guess it's now you can ask me a question, because I
Yeah.
don't really.
So, you mentioned sort of that you have certain forms of socialism that you agree with more. I mean, I mentioned market socialism. Is that sort of one of the ones that you're more opposed or more for, or is there a different one that you're?
Yeah, I would say market socialism is the most acceptable form of socialism, in my opinion. I think it's mostly just co-ops and unions And I do think that, yes, market socialism is still, at the end of the day, a socialist system. I don't think it allocates resources best, but it recognizes the need for a free market. So I think it is at the end of the day, sort of the less so evil of sorts.
And sort of along with that, I mentioned in the beginning in my opening statement that I believe in a moneyless society. So sort of what would be your rebuttal to a moneyless society? And then once you give your rebuttal, I can support mine.
Well, I would just say that moneyless society isn't, again, I don't think that's a really concept we can really create in the 21st century. I mean, I think we have to back up a product by what it's worth, and we have to have a system that allows us to add worth to a product. Other than that, we have bargaining, and then that, again, I don't have anything against bargaining per se, but I think if you're going to run an efficient economy, you have to have a universal standard somehow, and that would be monetary.
And I guess my rebuttal to that would be, the free market. I tweeted about this, I think last week, where I said, the free market is not an efficient way to, ensure the needs of your citizens are met, because it does not allocate resources based on who needs them. It allocates resources based on who can pay for them. And, even people who need those resources more, some of them may not be able to pay for it. And so I believe in a gift economy where, everyone's basic needs are covered, universally, no matter who you are, what your job is, what you do. You deserve to eat, you deserve to drink, you deserve to have shelter, clothing, healthcare, all of that stuff, basic needs of life. And everything else comes extra with work. So, you can sit at home and play video games all you want. You still have the basic needs. That is your right as a human being. But, you can't go to the store and, take a pack of Pokemon cards. And, the gift economy would be centered around, giving back to your citizens based on how much they input to the society. And without the money transaction, it's fairly simple, because we sort of are moving towards that now. We still have money, but with the use of debit cards and credit cards, it's just numbers on a screen that, have value, but there's no transaction really. It's just you put a card in a machine and then you can take your items. It's mostly just an extra step.
Well, it's still backed by U.S.
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, but theoretically, we're starting to move past a cash-based economy. Basically, is what I'm saying. Is you don't need paper currency, and I'm sort of getting off topic here, but the sort of I've heard this sort of try to be debunked by say, like, how do you account for supply and demand without money? You don't really need money to account for supply and demand. If you notice that a lot of products are being used, you should probably make more of that product. You don't need money to determine supply and demand. If someone, because food is a universal right, and so food should probably be a priority. And that's why I like Rojava, because they're completely self-sustainable, and they grow all their own food, and they distribute it. That's just sort of my vision for a cashless economy, because I detest giving something to someone because they have more paper rather than because they need it more.
Well, I'm going to do a couple of points to address. It seems like you're kind of supporting collective farming, which is not a policy I am really for. I mean, we don't really need to go over some of the horrors that happened in Ukraine under collectivization. And also, I don't think necessarily that just because it's a need, you aren't in. This may sound a little hot take, but you're not necessarily entitled to a need. because someone else is also going to have to provide that need. For instance, if a farmer is making crops, his entire thing should be he should own the crops, and if you want his crops, you should provide something for him, whether it be like, say, you have a trade he can use, you have, like, again, I just don't see how it would be fair to the farmer to say, okay, these crops are going to go to these people, and you will have to accept this. I just don't.
Well, sort of my rebuttal to that would be, the farmer, he's also getting something out of the transaction because, he's working in his field to, make food for everyone. And, in exchange for providing food for people, he receives healthcare. He also receives food. And, in my ideal society, people who have jobs that are needed by society would have access to like luxuries. Say, that farmer, because he's so integral to society, because he grows the food, which is a essential need for humanity to live, he could have access to a mansion. He could have access to a nice car. The farmer is an integral part of our society. And in exchange for him providing a basic service, he would be provided with, more material goods than someone else. He would have more access to those things because he is providing that essential service.
Well, it says this. I'm trying to collect this thoughts. Yeah, I'm just trying to think this through real quick. We're a little slow.
No worries. And yes, I see the comment. He does grow the food. He doesn't receive the food, but he is growing the food in order to essentially eat and to help other people eat.
Okay, so I wrote down your arguments in order so I could be more collected. You mentioned the mansion thing. It's like, yes, the farmer gets a mansion, but then again, this goes back to the earlier problem. Someone built that mansion, and so how is he going to be compensated? He's providing a luxury good, and then what are we going to do to compensate the one who gives him the luxury good he gets? And then we're in a cycle where we have to find out who's getting compensated for what. That's why I think a monetary system is best, because the farmer, because instead of this, a guy who's buying the crops, he can work a job, make money, and then give his compensation for the work to the farmer in a form. And so that's why I think a monetary system is better than the non-monetary system.
Yeah, and I can see that argument. Another thing, this sort of goes into another argument another debate topic we could go into, but, innovation. People say that, capitalism breeds innovation. And I would inherently disagree with that because I can't remember if it was you who I was talking to about this, but, Apple makes iPhones, right? And, every year they come out with a new iPhone, and it's basically the same iPhone with minor changes. And that is inherently not innovative because they're hardly innovating on anything, and they're just pumping out more money for themselves. And my argument against that would be, eventually, we're already seeing it now. We're starting to automate jobs, manufacturing jobs, even fast food jobs. You make a burger or make a robot that flips a burger. It's replacing jobs at a faster rate. And I believe that you could even see, I think that it's happening right now, robots are starting to take over construction jobs too. So eventually, we could get rid of all the menial labor that humans need to create and essentially automate all of that. And this is sort of a meme, but fully automated luxury communism. It's quite appealing because it's inherently realistic. Because we could just automate all manual labor that humans don't want to do. I've never met a construction worker who wants to make a house, there's the very few, but all of them just sort of do it because they need to make money.
Well, see, on the point of automation, I'll say this. I mean, it's like people talk about the truck drivers being automated. The issue is, I don't think they're really at that much of a threat. My explanation for that is that, again, it would be way too risky to just put a self-driving truck on its own with no protection. I mean, it's a lot easier to steal the stuff, and also limitations, like when it goes off the main road and it has to make a turn, it has to find which station it should go to. It has to find a scale to go on when it's being weighed. And again, so you're going to need someone to do that, even if it's just a small amount of work. It's still going to be someone who's going to have a lot of skill. It's going to be in a lot of demand, and probably it's going to be a low supply of them. And so so I don't think there's going to be that much of a hit on the trucko industry itself. I think it's actually going to, if anything, it might actually improve their lives.
Mm-hmm. And to your point about the truck is dangerous on itself on a stretch of road. Self-driving trucks have been driving cross country for years. I believe in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, a self-driving truck with no human in it delivered butter from Pennsylvania to California. I believe it was California, maybe it was Arizona. But the point is that it's happening right under our noses, and I believe in a capitalist system, the more you automate jobs away, the less people there are going to be able to get those jobs. And I used to make pizzas for a living, and there is I can't remember the name of the pizza place, but there is a pizza place in my town, or not in my town, in my old state, Oklahoma, I believe, that has a robot that flips pizzas and cooks pizzas. And any pizza place could get a robot and replace one of their workers. It could have been me. I could have been displaced from my job because a robot's more efficient. A robot doesn't get sick. A robot doesn't take days off. A robot never has to stop working. And under capitalism, the rich CEOs will do anything they can to increase efficiency and productivity and decrease their own costs, because that's how capitalism works. The more money you make, the more you win. And I just don't believe that's an ethical system, in my opinion.
I mean, the point about these self-serving restaurants is that I've seen them pop up, but a lot of them fail within the first year because these systems were not. They found they just weren't. They either weren't ready, they weren't efficient enough, and a lot of time they still required human labor. Like they still required people to run the machine. They still required all this. Required There was things the machine couldn't do, and so the humans had to do it for them. So I just don't think we'll ever really get to a place where we can say that you can just automate 100% of the jobs away, because there are going to be physical limitations to what technology can do no matter what.
Oh yeah,
there are just some hurdles you can't just overcross.
Yeah, of course. But at the same time, even though there is limitations to technology, at least right now, there is still, even though there's limitations, you're still automating human labor that could be done. And under capitalism, in our current system, labor is required. And that's sort of just to push back at your earlier statement, is that even though it's a need, I do believe that you are entitled to food, water, housing, and because it is literally the basic human needs. It's the very bottom tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need these things to survive. So I do believe that you are entitled to food, water, shelter, healthcare, housing, because it is a basic human right.
Well, then I guess that can open up an interesting question. Let's say that we somehow manage to overcome every physical limitation to technology. We automate 100% of the jobs. Would you be necessarily opposed to a system where that can still happen, but the people will obviously be compensated because, there are people in the system? And so, and since technology is ultimately going to have to serve their needs, this might be basically for a producer to make money, they need a consumer, and preferably large consumer bases are better for them. So the question comes in: would there be an incentive for a producer to create more to find ways to get consumers to buy the product, even if it means even if it means sometimes government subsidies for said consumers to buy the products? Like that, that's this.
Do you
Well,
mean like?
yeah.
I'm just asking to clarify.
Yeah.
So what are you talking about there? Are you talking about, Grayson, like essentially they've automated away most of the lower kind of level jobs and or the bulk of labor, but then in order to keep the economy going, they have some sort of like unconditional income, so they still use currency to like exchange goods.
Yeah, like maybe it's like a universal basic income, like the Yang philosophy.
Mhm. It would depend because I support universal basic income, but ideally, of course, I don't want there to be currency, but I think under capitalism, more currency for the working class and the poor is always better. Um, I, I, it's sort of, it's hard for me because one, if you provide the working class with money, they'll be able to get back on their feet. But at the same time, that money just goes straight back up to the top. And, especially if, all work is automated, you're basically just cutting out all the middlemen and giving your money directly to Jeff Bezos. And he would just get much, much richer if we automate all of the work. Even if people are, compensated more than they are now through a robust UBI. But even then, Jeff Bezos just gets richer off of doing nothing. um, and I don't know. That's a hard one for me because,
I don't know
yeah.
though. I mean, this is a question about inequality. I personally don't see necessarily a problem with wealth inequality as long as the poorest people reach basic needs. Like I don't see a problem with someone being this rich and someone being this rich. As long as these people here get basic needs, this guy can skyrocket his wealth all he wants.
Mhm.
As long as he like plays by the rules of the free market and basic laws set by the government, then I don't see any problem with this guy being healed, this guy being healed, as long as everything's working out like that.
Mhm. And that's sort of a question I have for you is, what do you think are the rules of the free market? Some people, like anarcho-capitalists, don't think there should be rules based, other than the non-aggression principle, of course. But since you are not an anarcho-capitalist, I believe, what do you think are the rules of the free market?
Oh no, I am not an anarcho-capitalist. That's, I literally spent all of yesterday debating those guys on Twitter. But no, the regulations on capitalism there's a lot of, I would say there are four basic regulations for capitalism. One, we don't do free trade with nations that could be considered national security threats. So that would obviously be no free trade with China, Iran, Russia, those nations like that. The second, another rule to capitalism is that to have it work, you have to prevent monopolies, and you can't just let them consolidate. Even though, again, technically a monopoly itself may not be so negative simply because they still need to keep the prices low for people to buy those stuff. I still think competition is ultimately better for that. So government's role should be to push the most extreme form of monopolies out government's role should also be to prevent fraud and also and then the fourth rule to capitalism should be that the wages and to compensate people for labor should be negotiated every year between the person who pays them and the laborers themselves. And the laborers should just pick whatever can pick the benefits they want, and then they can like negotiate from them, kind of like South Korea.
Shit. I had a point, but I forgot it. I was thinking. It was a really good point too. Maybe I'll remember it later. All right, you can go ahead and ask me a question now. I'll think of what I was going to say.
You probably remember after the debate. It's like, oh crap, that's what it was. But I mean, sort of back to the point of socialism, you seem to be kind of like this robo-apocalypse anarcho-communist in a way, where it's like you seem to be more for anarcho-communism because it might prevent the dystopic futures of the robo-apocalypse. So, I mean, let me just ask you again one question. Would your way of thinking be different if a robo-apocalypse was guaranteed not to happen?
Well, my philosophy is to mitigate as much harm, or to mitigate as much harm as possible. And even if the robo-apocalypse, as you say, of a fully automated workforce, still under capitalism where people need money, even if it would be guaranteed not to happen, it's sort of starting to happen now, even where we don't even know if it's guaranteed, but it's still taking jobs away from people who need it. Like truck drivers. Once these truck companies, even manufacturing. We'll use manufacturing. It's a better analogy for this. So manufacturing companies use automation because it's efficient and they don't need to stop working unless there's a technical problem, and then they need to call in the specialist, which is fine. But majority, it's efficient and it works, and it keeps, we'll use Elon Musk as an example. It keeps Elon Musk's profits high and his productivity high as well. And a lot of people turn to manufacturing or, just factory working in general as a first job. A lot of people in my area work at a factory because it's a good paying job, but especially in our area, it's a low cost area. A factory job pays about $14 an hour, I believe. But if you automate those jobs away, you'll say, I don't need these human workers. I just am paying them for nothing, basically. I could just build more robots or buy more robots, and they'll make me more money. And even though the robot apocalypse is not guaranteed, I still think mitigating harm through sort of disincentivizing robot use over human use, because you're stripping jobs away from the economy just to line your pockets, basically. And that's my philosophy behind it.
So I guess I just have one question. Do you think there is any country that's actually handling this whole robo-apocalypse thing better, or do you think that they're all equally going to suffer because of it?
Well, I have not completely, researched a lot of countries' responses to it, but the U.S. is doing a somewhat decent job. We're still adding more jobs to the economy. I believe Biden added like fucking 1 million jobs or something like that. But I'd have to do more research on other countries. But the main point is that it's starting to to come faster, and it's under our nose, and we don't even know it's happening yet because all these companies, they're, especially with the pandemic probably accelerated a lot faster because when the economy shut down, all these big businessmen were like, well, now what? My workers, they're either too afraid to come in, they can't come in, or they're coming in and they're getting sick. So what I do is I buy more robots. I don't have to stop my production, and I mitigate my costs because I just have to buy robots one time and they do all the work. I'm using the same point over and over again because I want to drive it home. Is that the top 1% does not care about your wages; they only care about their profits and keeping their productivity high because it makes them more profit. Profit is the sole motivator under capitalism, and I believe that is inherently evil because people like Jeff Bezos, like Elon Musk, will do whatever they can to ensure their profits, even at the expense of workers.
This point does seem like I'm still don't know if this robo-apocalypse, like, you may call me old-fashioned. I'm still not convinced this robo-apocalypse is going to be negative. Like, we're still adding millions of jobs to our economy. Like, manufacturing is, I mean, granted, it's not doing as well because there's also a lot of outsourcing, but I mean, manufacturing is doing all right. I mean, a lot of it is being outsourced to like India, but again, the thing with, I just don't see it. I just don't want to see it as a big problem. But I mean, we'll see who's right in a few years. I mean, I would hate for me to be right. I mean, for you to be right because
you hate to see a communist winning, I guess.
well, yeah. I mean, you probably hate this because you probably hate to see you right too, though. Because
Oh yeah, definitely.
if I'm right, then nothing.
Well, I would have imagined that for you, Chairman, that it actually wouldn't be such a bad thing because then if all the machines come about and they can do all of the labor, then we don't have to work anymore. And wouldn't that be ideal? Is there some reason you would think that this would be a negative situation if all the machines come around? And I mean, I guess you would have to give people either money or a resource-based economy, I guess is what you're advocating for. So
yeah, so I advocated for again, it's a meme, but fully automated luxury communism, where all of the manual labor is automated, and people can focus more on their passions and thinking more, innovating more, inventing more, just to progress our society. And I don't believe a fully automated workforce or economy is inherently a bad thing. I think it would actually be a good thing under the right circumstances. I don't believe a fully automated economy under capitalism is a good thing because it takes away all the jobs and it just ends up, funneling money up to the top faster than ever before. But I don't think, automation in and of itself is bad because it does increase productivity. But under capitalism, it takes away jobs. And of course, we can shift jobs around, but at the end of the day, there's only so many jobs we can spare, basically. And eventually, I think we probably will end up having to adopt some form of socialism, probably market socialism. In the 21st century, market socialism is probably the most realistic form of socialism, and I'm willing to accept that. I just don't think it's far enough, in my opinion.
I forget whose question it is to ask your question.
I'm still trying to think of what I was gonna say.
I can ask Grayson a question, then you can have some time to think about it. So I guess the original, it seemed like the key part of this debate was about which was better for poor people. I think that was in the title. So I guess it seems kind of obvious why it would be better, at least for a certain class of poor people, depending on what you think of socialism and consider poor. Like, say, a homeless person or something, at least his system, the communist system, you're talking about people that have nothing now. They're at least going to have, maybe you think in the grand scheme, like the middle class will disappear, but like certainly the poor on some level would be better off if you just gave them a house and money and these sorts of things. So why is it, Grayson, do you think that capitalism is beneficial to the poor?
Well, I mean, the point was, I think, was to be for poor nations like in
Oh,
Africa.
poorer nations. Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah, that was, I was hoping to be the original topic, but it doesn't matter. But I think that free trade works for a nation very well. I think that basically free trade, opening up the economy from these like autocratic rulers we see in the Congo, let private and foreign investments come into your country. That is how you lift yourself out of poverty. It's like, yeah, we can talk about the robo apocalypse in America all we want. Africa, they don't get the robo apocalypse. They still have the regular apocalypse. They don't get the. They don't. It's like those. Some of those nations don't even have ATMs. They're not afraid of automation over there. What they need is they need to actually get to a situation where this first world problem of automation can actually apply to them first. And again, I feel like it would be a noble cause to focus on that sort of first world, pushing them to first world first, because why would we focus on trying to better the lives of some of people who are generally wealthier than they are on average, a lot wealthier, when they are the ones who definitely need the most help?
Well, it would seem like the follow-up to that would be, are they not? You're talking about the third world. It's a lot of nations, pretty broad. Do you think that they're all, or even most of them, aren't operating under a capitalist system currently? That there's something they could change fundamentally? That is there something about that? Like you said, Africa. I don't know how many socialist nations there are there, but are they predominantly socialist, or?
Well, they're not predominant. I don't think there is definitely a lot of socialism in Africa because of the whole African nationalist movements, but I wouldn't say they're predominantly socialist. They're predominantly authoritarian. They have a lot of centralized, nationalized ownership of the resources. The issue with, and so that's, I forgot. The issue with the African, and this is not just Africa, this is also Haiti, Laos, India, but the issue with that whole thing about calling them socialists or capitalists is that they just have, it's just an autocratic rule, and so that's why I think liberalism and capitalism are obviously the best system. Yes, you can have a poor capitalist country because capitalism isn't the only factor. It's not the be all end all to the discussion. Like, you need to have a democratic system, you need to have stable governments, you need to have a relatively low crime rate, and you probably don't want terrorism in your country if you want to succeed. So,
And so I sort of have a rebuttal to that. I would say personally that there is zero socialist countries in the world right now, as far as I know, at least. And if there is, I would love someone to tell me if it fits the definition. But as far as I know, there's zero countries that the workers own the means of production in, at least completely. There is some. Cuba has I believe, a fully publicized farming industry, but that doesn't make Cuba socialist. It means they have a publicized farming industry. And Marx wrote about, I talked about this in the beginning, but sort of dialectical materialism. And the problem with dialectical materialism and the third world is that the third world only has so many, or has so much material goods. They are the third world after all. And you can't, capitalism is a necessary stepping stone in the what's it called?
The road to socialism.
Yes, the road to socialism. That's what I'm looking for. Capitalism is a necessary stepping stone in the road to socialism. And Marx wrote about that. He completely, acknowledged that. Capitalism is needed to somewhat improve the material conditions of the working class before the revolution. And, and I concede that capitalism has done quite a bit for a lot of people, and it has done quite a lot more for an even smaller group of people. And that's my whole problem. It can help a lot of people out, but as a system, it and I'm going to use this argument that people use for communism. It's good on paper, but not good in practice, because people say that capitalism is a means to uplift the workers, but at the same time, the middle class is currently shrinking in America, and the 1% is getting richer and richer. And in the third world, you don't have that those material conditions that we have here in America, because the third world has been exploited for their resources. And we sort of had this discussion a little bit in our last debate, because countries like France and the UK and America have all asserted their dominance over these third world countries, and rather than building them up, I've just sort of kept them under their rule, especially the UK and France. But the third world, it's sort of a interesting. When you look at Burkina Faso, for example, it used to be a French colony, and then Thomas Sankara took over, and he was a Marxist-Leninist. I don't agree with Marxist-Leninism, but I do think that Thomas Sankara did a lot of good things for the people of Burkina Faso. He ended female genital mutilation. He progressed women's rights. He raised the vaccination rate and the literacy rate by a lot, but he could not reach full communism or even socialism because of the material conditions of his country. And that's sort of the whole point of this big rant that I've gone on, is that the material conditions of a country is directly responsible or directly correlated to whether or not socialism or communism can be implemented. So, yeah, that's my whole point there.
Well, I mean, I think this is actually kind of opening up one interesting thing because I've looked on like Pew Research, and I've seen like data that shows that people in third world countries tend to prefer capitalism over people in first world countries. Vietnam is the most pro-capitalist country in the world, according to Pew. So is it necessarily that capitalism is going to lift the third world out of poverty, and then like communism would have to like push the first world further?
You could probably make some sort of a case for that. I'm not sure completely that I agree with you. At least maybe I'm reading into this the wrong way, but that I could probably see that, yeah, where capitalism would move the people in third world countries like Africa, or continents, I guess, in Africa's case, out of extreme poverty, and then communism would sort of equal, or I guess socialism first, because socialism comes before communism. Socialism would equal the playing field, because under socialism, the workers own the means of production. They make all the decisions regarding the company. They make all the decisions regarding the economy, things like that. They get higher wages, and then communism is basically just the end goal, where classless, moneyless society where workers own the means of production. So yeah, you could make a case for capitalism being the means to which improve the third world's material conditions. Yeah.
The one thing I will say, I don't think, unless Robo-Apocalypse is real, I still don't think the First World should do communism yet. But again, we have to wait for that Third World Apocalypse to start.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying if it was the case, Grayson, that like the overwhelming majority of labor jobs were going to be automated, that you would be in favor of communism?
I would say if there was substantial evidence that there was going to be a massive pool of unemployed people, like 10, 20, 30%, then yeah, I would support more socialistic systems. Probably want to go for full-blown communism. Unless it gets to like 90%, then I think we should definitely try an experiment.
I hear this sort of argument a lot, is where communism's never been tried, or I guess it sort of has been tried, but it always just ends up in authoritarian regimes such as the USSR or China or North Korea or whatever. And that goes back to the very first question in the debate: is using the state as an apparatus to achieve socialism is not going to work at all, because socialism is not about state power; it's about worker power, and it. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me that people think using state power to achieve socialism or communism will work. But I'm.
Well, there are different definitions of. Some people would define socialism as state power, but.
Well, I guess the question for that, with regard to that, Chairman, how would you were asking him about certain problems with his system, but you're advocating for this without the state, and you're talking about it like resources would be abundant, so they would be able to go to wherever people need them, I assume. How would you determine, like, I guess, because not everyone is going to, everyone needs more or less the same kind of basic, like, calories and house and all that stuff. But then there's all the luxury stuff you're talking about. How do you determine how much someone needs and how much, if they want it? Like, how would you keep someone from just, like, basically demanding that they want, a ton of whatever the resource is, bread or cars or whatever, and hoarding it for themselves with no state? How do you prevent something like that from happening?
Well, and I'll say that I'm not opposed to I'm more opposed to a centralized state rather than a decentralized government. And in my ideal system, it would be based around local governments and local confederations, and everyone within that community. Let's say my town in Idaho, bumfuck rural Idaho. Everyone within the community would dictate what happens, and say they want to build a grocery store. Of course, grocery stores would be different as to how they are now, but the community would make those decisions. And to your point about people hoarding resources, like I guess to say to that, I would say, how do you steal something that's free? I guess if we're talking about food, they're going to eat that food eventually, right? And but there probably should be some regulations, considering food is a necessary need for people. And if you're taking more food than you need at the current moment, you are taking it from someone else. So I think the basis around that, those sort of regulations would come from the workers of the establishment that you would be getting the food from. Say you want 6 loaves of bread, but the rule dictated by the workers of that current establishment say, sorry, no 6 loaves of bread for one person. So there would not be no regulations. It would just not be dictated by a federal government. It would be determined by each different establishment and local jurisdiction, I guess.
Yeah, I guess my point against that is that the local. What if these local governments decide so that well, let's just say this. Let's just say we have a local commune, and they decide to take a daily dose of crazy pills. It's like, well, that county has better resources. They're being a little protectionist over there. Let's go in and take them ourselves. It's like I just don't want to like start like some international community crisis, but
Mhm. Well, the basis of communism is not about taking what's rightfully yours. It's about cooperation. And if that certain community has resources to spare, um, I don't see any reason why the people in that community wouldn't say, "Hey, if these people need it more, why not give it to them?" Um, but of course, that's a sort of a um, idealistic. But
this is
um,
where we get into like philosophy.
yeah, this is a philosophical debate, and this gets into like human nature and shit like that. People say communism goes against human nature, but I don't believe that at all. I believe it actually supports human nature because human nature is not tied to an economic system. That's just sort of stupid. And human nature changes throughout history. And human nature changed when we instituted capitalism. Human nature changed when we instituted feudalism. Human nature changed when we got rid of slavery. It's just human nature changes based on material needs, which is goes back to dialectical materialism. Um, and I think that communism inherently supports human nature because humans don't want to hurt others. I don't think that you would ever want to, you know, hurt anyone, right? Like, you don't just think about, hurting your next door neighbor, right? And, and hurt is sort of subjective in this case. And, but, communism is all about cooperation. And capitalism is all about gaining a profit at whatever cost. And uh, I think gaining a profit at whatever cost is inherently exploitive and hurtful to the majority of the population. And the top 1% will, enjoy the profits while, shitting on their workers and union busting and, paying starvation wages. Um, and yeah, that's just sort of my spiel on human nature. But
Well, I'm going to do kind of this human nature argument by making this point. Let's just say that, like, you wouldn't deny that there are political extremists in America. It's just like obviously. So let's just say we have like the white power movement of just to say some bumfuck county in North Dakota, and they just go on these ranting like invasions. Like they take over the commune and like, right, we're gonna take back the United States of America. We are gonna bring it back as one country. I mean, the issue with that I can see is that I'm concerned it's just going to become because what will happen is it will invade the counties. The counties themselves, if they're strong enough, might be able to fight back, but if they aren't and they lose, other counties are probably not going to help them. We already see this in foreign policy already. No one wants to really help the Afghan people anymore against the Taliban. No one really wants to go after the weak of China's atrocities against Uyghurs. No one wants to go really protect the people of Myanmar. So that's another thing I'm kind of concerned about. People are just going to have this sort of isolationist, nihilistic feeling in this society. They may not want to go and help their fellow man in Idaho. They just want to stay in Georgia because those white supremacists can never reach out. They're in North Dakota. We're in Georgia. They're not going to get healed.
Mhm. I completely see where you're coming from on that, but that's sort of a hang up that I had as well. But again, I admire the system that Rojava has because it is completely community oriented. And let's say in this hypothetical scenario that the white supremacist from the bumfuck county in North Dakota They come down and they attack Idaho. My bumfuck Idaho commune. And since my bumfuck Idaho commune has a great, in my area, we farm potatoes, which is stereotypical, but it's true. We farm potatoes. That's what our community does here. The people in Georgia, the people in Utah, the people in Nevada, or this is sort of subjective because states would not exist, but in these sort of places, they would say, "Hey, our potato farmers are getting attacked by white supremacists. Are we willing to lose this potato resource? Are we willing to let our comrades die?" I would think not, because even though my bumfuck county, Idaho, may not seem significant, you would be losing a central piece of your democracy because you would have less people to have a say in things. And that sort of goes back to democratic confederalism, because each of these confederations each has a say in how the society runs. And if one wants to take over another, that throws off the balance. And especially if they're white supremacists, I would hope that the majority of these communes around the United States territory would mobilize against white supremacy, because that is sort of a completely antithetical to communism, and would be inherently a bad thing if white supremacists were to take over a commune, and that would be horrible.
I guess my thing about that is that you still, I'm pretty like, I know, I've seen some of the people in America. There would definitely be those who are like, no, we can't go protect, we can't just why send our troops to die for potatoes? We can get potatoes elsewhere. That would be imperialism if we because we're doing wars for potatoes. It's like, I know people would make that argument. People, like, it would be the Jimmy Doles and the Kyle Klasinskis. There'd just be so many of them making these arguments. And if these people have substantial influence in the commune, that could negatively affect. And by the time they finally go to defend themselves, it'd be too late because there's no one to defend them.
And that's why in under communism, it's sort of surprising to people when I say this, but gun rights is a very integral part of communism, because the working class cannot defend themselves from the state or any other oppressors without access to weapons. And us here in Idaho would or it's potatoes and all. Anyway, that was funny. But us here in Idaho, we would obviously defend ourselves with our guns from these white supremacists, and we wouldn't all be helpless, because we would obviously fight. And I'm sure that surrounding communes, will say in the more urban parts of Idaho, yes, would come to our aid, because we are their neighbors, we are their friends, and they don't want to see a community right next to them get invaded by white supremacists, because what happens next? Are they going to come for us? Are they going to come for this other neighbor? It's sort of just a community solidarity thing rather than an isolationist thing. And I'm sure you are right, there would be those people who don't want to get involved, but especially in the areas surrounding this bumfuck county in Idaho that's getting invaded by white supremacists, they would definitely probably mobilize to defend their neighbors and to defend our way of life.
I guess there was just one more scenario, and then we can get off this topic, because this is kind of but let's just say we have this Napoleon type figure, like this very charismatic guy. He doesn't like this communal system. He thinks we should go back to the one nation state, and he rallies the people of multiple communes. And he's a very tactician genius. He knows how to divide and conquer. It's like, again, I know that's kind of theoretical, but I feel like that could be open. I feel like he unites 12 communes together. You're already 12 times stronger than the next person. and then he's able to play them off each other like, no, we're not fit. This is all democratic. We decided this. But also, let's take a look at that little river dispute you guys have on. And oh, hopes looks like there might be resources there now. It's like, also, I have a feeling that it could turn into sort of a system where you have like very charismatic leaders like take over individual communes, expand their communes, and you essentially get more of a warlord like system in America.
Yeah, and that's definitely a valid concern. And sort of a pushback I would have for that is, ideally under this system, since we're talking about theoreticals here, in this idealist system, no one would want the nation state back. And if the majority of people see this threat happening, and going back to your sort of this isn't isolationist. We still have contact with these people, and we still have free trade and trading, and we can still move throughout these communes and have communication. If say it's happening in California, this Napoleon-like figure, and has rallied all of the communes in California and has shot any dissent for people who don't want this nation state back, or has exiled them basically. The majority of the country would probably be like, that sort of goes our entire system, non-cooperational, but again, that's sort of up to those communes. If they want that, that's fine. They can create their own state, but they wouldn't be a part of our system. But as soon as you start shooting people who are a part of our system, that's when we have to fight back. And then it becomes sort of just a fight. But I don't believe that any one warlord type person could create a one nation state dictatorship that would sweep all of these communes. But if that's what the majority of the working class wanted to return to, then it's up to them because it's democratic. And obviously, if the majority of the working class wants a one nation state back, obviously this system wasn't working well for them. So
I could probably imagine it turning into like the Taliban did not have majority support in Afghanistan. They were still able to take over 90% of the country.
Mhm.
So I feel like even if you could prevent an invasion, if they're able to set up a good defense, you're basically in a forever war, and morale will just go down to whoever can wait out the longest.
Mhm. And it would sort of be different under this system than with the situation with the Taliban, because every community would have they would have weapons, they would have the means to defend themselves, and rather in the Taliban situation that really wasn't the case. But I do sort of see your concern there. But yeah, I think if the majority of the people in all of these communes wanted this system back, that's fine. Obviously, this system that we had going wasn't working for them. And if they want something else, that's fine. If the majority of people in this whole territory want to return to a one nation state, that's fine. But I don't think the majority of the people in this territory would want that, because that's, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like something someone would want.
So coming up on the hour mark, is there any other points you wanted to hit on? I think I've hit it on most of my points I wanted to.
Yeah, I hit on the point I wanted to talk about. I remembered what it was. So unless there's anything else the moderator wants to bring up, then...
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know how long you would want to drag it on. I could ask questions forever, but
no, I don't really want to drag it on too long. I have another stream planned after this one.
Oh wow!
I know you have your thing too.
Yeah. I don't really have anything going on right now, but whenever this is done, we can be done. But if you want to ask another question, I'm cool. I'm cool to keep going for a little bit.
Yeah, I could go for a little bit too.
Okay, well, I get. Well, did you have something there, Grayson?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess the question I was going to ask for chairman. Let's see. I guess there could be a few things. I guess would even under your system, if you had someone and they wanted to open their own business, like in the old days, and you were saying, you would think that no one would want to do these sorts of things, but it would seem like inevitable. I mean, right now, the majority of people want capitalism. That's the way it is. So even under that system, if you had someone that decided they wanted to basically open a business and start trading and doing things like that, would that even be really an issue given it seems like you're imagining the situation where there's massive resource abundance. So if they started up something where they're producing some unique good, because up till now we've been talking about things like potatoes and bread, but say they're producing some sort of new invention that they've created and they hire people to assemble it, and they decide that they're going to basically get I don't know, something to compensate them with, and they're doing all of this, and it's making this individual, he's basically, I guess you wouldn't have currency around unless they started issuing it themselves, but he's filtering resources to himself. Would this be something that you would have to stop, even though it's not really, it's all voluntary?
Well, this is sort of an argument that I see made. What if I wanted to start a business and have my own currency? That's fine. Like, if you want to, if someone voluntarily wants to go into your business and trade a currency that only you will use, that's fine. The majority of these communes won't use your fucking currency. So it won't hurt anyone really, but if you start basing people's needs on this currency, and it would sort of turn into a literally Ancapistan, then that would be a problem. That would be something that people in the community would have to step in, because under this system, you cannot, or no one would be able to, gatekeep basic needs or anything behind a currency. But if you want to provide a currency for work, you can. It would probably only be a one commune currency, because most communes would be like, what the fuck are you doing? I don't want this piece of paper that you've given me. You can just have this piece of bread. I don't need anything back. Like, I don't see a problem with that. But
Well,
once you
I
start
guess
keeping needs behind it, then yeah.
I was going to say theoretically they could pay them with resources from the other commune, but why would anyone want to do it when they could go out and just attain whatever they want? Like, they could just say the guy wanted to pay him in gold, but if anyone can go get gold, why do they need to get it from him? They could just go get it from the facility mining it or whatever. But I guess maybe one more thing would, because I know it's a kind of a Marxist thing to oppose religion. Would that be something you would think you would have to get around religious dogmatists first? Because they're the things they want, like a lot of what you're talking about is, people's kind of material needs in this world and the things that they would want. But religious people, depending on the religion, they're all different. But like, if you think about your fundamentalist Christians in America, they would have an interest in keeping, they have their own in-group that's distinct from the masses, I would suppose. There are other groups like Muslims. They would have an interest in keeping resources to themselves, having more resources, being able to you see what I'm getting at there,
Yeah.
where different sorts of in-groups have an interest in attaining resources for their group to use to give them advantages over other people. Is that something you would think humanity would have to overcome first before they could achieve socialism?
Well, I will say that, Marxism isn't inherently opposed to religion. I personally, I'm not really a religious guy, but, I don't have a problem with someone practicing a religion. I prefer spirituality over an organized religion, but if you want to practice an organized religion, that's fine by me. I don't think, as far as I know, any, mainstream Marxist theory, philosopher has actively assumed religion as a threat, but I digress. I do think that certain communities hoarding resources at the expense of other communities would be a problem we would have to overcome. Um, but uh, the in our society currently, we're sort of integrated and religious wise, and if you are in a community and say you have you say you have 5 Christians, 2 Muslims, 4 Jewish people, and then like 6 atheists or something like that. Um, all of these people depend on each other to, work in the society. They all need each other. And when you have one group of people sectioning themselves off and not providing anything else for those people, um, it's everyone's detriment because those people don't get any resources from these people, and these people don't get any resources to or from these people. So I don't think it would happen in this system, at least widespread, if a majority population, say, we'll use New York City as an example. If the Jewish population of New York City decided we are going to build a wall around our Jewish community and exclude everyone outside of it, then that would probably be a problem, and that would probably lead to some infighting. I don't think it's an entirely realistic scenario. Well, I guess we're not really speaking realistically here. It's more idealistic. But yeah, it's definitely a problem we'd have to overcome. But I believe if the system would work perfectly, then I don't believe it would be as much of a problem as people make it out to be. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Oh yeah, close enough, I suppose. Yeah, that's all I got, I guess, unless you had something, Grayson.
Well, I don't have any questions, so if Chairman has no more questions, we can go to closing remarks.
nope, no questions from me.
I guess I'll let Chairman go first.
Well, like I said, I believe in a stateless, classless, moneyless society where the workers own the means of production and everything is owned in common. And, I see a lot of people in the comments are disagreeing with me on this. There's that one that is in agreement with me. But, if you ever want to learn more about it, even if you probably won't agree with it, I always say if you want to hate something, you at least have to know what it is. And, a lot of people sort of chalk up communism as USSR, no iPhone, no food, bread lines, things like that. Or even when the government controls everything, which it's really just the exact opposite of that. And, if you ever want to learn about communism or anything like this, just sort of, message me on Twitter. It's just my Twitter handle, Chairman Wabbit. Or you can read Marx, read Emma Goldman, read Kropotkin, those sort of philosophers and theorists for sort of more information. But, if you want to learn more, feel free to DM me. That's my ideal society. I yield my time.
And for my closing remarks, I will say this has been a pretty interesting discussion as always. And I would say that certainly, if this robot apocalypse does happen, then I will certainly feel a little dumb. This would be a little outdated. And if you want to know more about sort of a neoconservative philosophy, I would recommend you read Irving Kristol, William Buckley, and John Bolton. And as a final remark, I am going to do a stream in about 15 minutes reacting to a very special monkey. Everyone knows him. It's Hawes. Hawes mad. And also with a special guest, the symbol of Western imperialism.
Well, that's certainly interesting.
Yeah, I feel like when I tell people this and I just realize, oh wait, you haven't heard of Hawes Dragon.
I have no clue.
Oh, you don't know who Haas is?
He's a tanky.
He's a Stalinist.
Makes sense.
He's an unhinged
Yeah, he's
Stalinist.
on top of that, he's also unhinged. He
Well,
screams at people quite a bit.
Yeah, I've done one debate with him, and he basically spent an hour yelling at me about how I was an idiot for calling the Roman Empire and the Roman Republic virtually the same country, because it was, but how I was an idiot too because I was saying the Mughal Empire and the Mongol Empire weren't the same.
That's
Yeah.
sense.
It's a Stalinist, but anyway, with that, I'll end the stream and see you guys in about 15 minutes.